So the submitted material is a broadcast transcript analyzing a controversial book launch by journalist Israel Frey, the state and municipal funding behind it, and the broader institutional reactions from the media and legal system.
Right. Yeah.
And, while this piece definitely has a really passionate core, it needs some structural and tonal refinement to really maximize its impact. Let's just dive right in.
Yeah, let's do it. So the narrative arc diffuses its core impact by attempting to tackle too many distinct institutional grievances simultaneously.
Exactly. I mean, before we can even analyze the specific arguments here, we first have to look at the overall scope of what the piece is trying to tackle, right?
Definitely. Because, the material actually begins with this highly specific, really compelling investigation into Israel Frey.
Yeah, it's a great hook.
Event. But then the scope just rapidly spirals outward from there.
Oh, it completely balloons.
Right. Within a few paragraphs, it attempts to indict Channel 12, and then it pivots to the Attorney General's views on democracy.
Don't forget the yeshiva student fund.
Yes, the yeshiva funding, and then it even brings in this military education core documentary called The Slippery Slope. It's just, the scattered approach dilutes the primary thesis. It makes the piece feel like a disconnected list of grievances.
Rather than a cohesive investigation. Yeah. So a key theme running through this material seems to be focus. It feels like trying to put out 5 fires with 1 bucket of water, Like, if we focus all the water on the biggest fire, which is the funding of the event, it puts it out. But right now, we're just splashing a little bit everywhere.
Exactly. And the suggestion here is to anchor the entire piece around a single, unifying structural theme.
Okay, like what?
Well, something like the mechanics of state funding for controversial figures, and then you have to aggressively prune or subordinate any elements that do not directly serve that specific thesis.
So basically killing your darling. But how does a writer decide which fires to ignore, without feeling like they are leaving crucial context on the cutting room floor?
That is the big fear, right? Writers think, if I don't include everything, they won't get the big picture. But let's look at concrete examples from the text.
Okay, yeah.
Take that really long tangent about the Attorney General's broad philosophical statements on democracy.
Right, it goes on for quite a bit.
It does. Instead of pivoting to that separate tangent, you only mention the AG strictly in the context of her specific ruling on Frey's event funding.
Oh, I see. So you don't cut her entirely, you just constrain her to the main thesis.
Exactly. And the same goes for the military education core and the Slippery Slope documentary. You just remove that entirely.
Wait, completely?
Completely. Unless, of course, it can be explicitly tied back to the exact same Ministry of Culture funding mechanism that supported Frey's book launch. If it's just another example of, a state institution doing something wrong, it belongs in a different piece.
That makes total sense. It keeps the reader from having to constantly reset their cognitive baseline.
Right, because human attention is finite. You can't ask the audience to memorize a new set of budgets and hypocrisies every 2 paragraphs.
For sure. So now that we've narrowed down exactly what we should be focusing on, we need to examine how we are presenting it, right? Specifically, the tone.
Yes, the rhetoric used is huge here. Relying on highly charged absolute labels can unintentionally undermine the objective credibility of the argument for a broader, more skeptical audience.
Yeah. The tone in this draft is pretty intense.
It is. The frequent use of extreme terminology creates a really high barrier to entry.
Like when it repeatedly labels Frey a terrorist?
Yes, or when it suggests that panel guests analyzing the left should include a psychiatrist, or broadly declaring Channel 12 as an anti-Zionist entity suffering from mass psychosis.
Oh, wow. Yeah, mass psychosis is a heavy claim to drop in an investigation.
Exactly. And while this rhetoric might resonate strongly with an audience that already agrees with the author, it completely alienates neutral listeners.
It makes it sound more like an emotional venting session rather than a rigorous exposé. I can see what you're going for here. Let's see how we can strengthen this.
Right. So the suggestion is simply to let the primary evidence do the heavy lifting.
Okay, so dial back the adjectives?
Exactly. You present the direct quotes and the factual actions neutrally. This allows the audience to arrive at the conclusion of extremism entirely on their own.
Which is always more powerful, right? When the reader connects the dots themselves.
It is much more powerful. For a concrete example, rather than stating up front that Frey is a, quote, terror supporter par excellence, you just start directly with his verbatim quote.
You mean the one about the Nablus attacker seeking legitimate targets in Tel Aviv?
Yes. Just let the severity of his own words sit with the audience. You don't need to add editorialized labels because the quote itself does the work.
And what about the Attorney General part?
Same thing. Instead of diagnosing her with psychosis, focus strictly on the legal contradiction at play.
So juxtapose her defense of Frey's event under freedom of speech with her concurrent actions against right-wing platforms?
Exactly. Just put the two facts side by side and let the contradiction speak for itself.
But let me push back a little bit. Isn't there a risk that by neutralizing the language too much, the piece loses its sense of urgency?
It's a common concern. Yeah.
Like, how does the author maintain the genuine outrage of the situation without resorting to those hyperbolic labels? I mean, it is an outrageous situation to the author.
It is, but urgency doesn't come from the author yelling that it's an outrage. Urgency generates naturally when the reader is presented with an inescapable, meticulously documented double standard.
So the facts are the alarm bell.
Right. If you clearly show the audience that public tax dollars funded speech validating attacks on civilians, they will supply the outrage for you. You don't need to yell.
That's a great point. Okay, so once the tone is calibrated to let the evidence speak for itself, we have to make sure the logical connections binding that evidence together are actually airtight.
This brings us to the structural robustness of the arguments. The causal link drawn between an individual's attendance at an event and the systemic policy of their employer requires stronger foundational evidence to hold up under scrutiny.
Let's look closely at the section discussing Arad Nir in Channel 12, because this jumped out to me too.
Yeah, it's a significant logical leap. The material argues that because Arad Nir attended Frey's book launch, Channel 12 itself is actively backing terror.
Which a critical audience will immediately flag as guilt by association, right?
Exactly. An employee's off-duty attendance at an event, even if they are a senior employee, does not automatically prove systemic corporate endorsement.
I mean, if Channel 12's PR department read this, they'd just say he went on his own time, and the whole argument collapses.
Precisely. So to make the indictment of the media institution robust, the material needs to provide evidence of how the network itself structurally supported the event.
Or maybe demonstrate how his specific attendance directly influenced editorial decisions on air.
Yes, exactly. You need a sturdy empirical bridge. So for concrete examples, the author could include data on whether Channel 12 officially promoted Frey's book on their broadcasts around the time of the event.
Did they give it free airtime, that sort of thing?
Right. And another example is contrasting Arad Nir's attendance with Channel 12's official HR or editorial policies.
The draft actually mentions a hypothetical about this, right?
It does. It asks what would happen if someone attended a rally against the LGBTQ community. But hypotheticals don't prove institutional hypocrisy.
So what should they do instead?
Dig into the archives. If the network previously reprimanded or fired another reporter for attending a radical right-wing rally, document that specific double standard. That proves institutional hypocrisy using corporate precedent rather than relying solely on Nir's physical presence in the room.
That makes the macro argument undeniable. But is it possible the author assumes the audience already views Channel 12 as biased and therefore feels they just don't need to prove the systemic link?
That happens all the time when writing for an echo chamber. You get lazy with your burden of proof.
So how do we convince the author that proving the micro-link here is essential?
You have to remind them that if the goal is to hold up against actual public scrutiny, you must assume the reader is deeply skeptical. Proving the HR double standard or the broadcast data corners the skeptical reader. It removes their ability to dismiss the claim as mere commentary.
You're locking them in with factual evidence.
Exactly. It changes the argument from, I don't like who they hang out with, to, here is the empirical proof of their bias.
That is such a crucial distinction. Okay, I think we've covered some really transformative ground. Let's briefly recap the three main takeaways for the next draft.
Sounds good.
First, we need to narrow the narrative focus to a single core theme, like the event funding, instead of bouncing between the AG and the military core.
Right.
Second, neutralize those highly charged labels, no more mass psychosis, and just let the severe primary evidence speak for itself.
Let the quotes do the work, yeah.
And third, ensure any logical leaps, like tying an individual's actions to an entire network, are backed by concrete policy comparisons or broadcast data.
Perfect. So the actionable next steps for the author would be to go in and cut the tangent about the military education core completely, then systematically replace the editorial labels with direct quotes from Frey.
And finally, hit the archives to find a comparative HR policy from Channel 12 to prove that institutional double standard.
Exactly. Those 3 steps will completely elevate this piece.
Well, we warmly invite the listener to apply these structural and tonal edits and submit the revised material back to the critique for further review. The raw materials are all here. They just need to be assembled with a bit more precision. We can't wait to read the next iteration.